I looked everywhere for the skin man, begging this to stop. It has to stop! I can't keep doing this. Today I got dressed and headed to work, but called off in the process. I followed the same route in my car, but instead of turning into my work site, I kept going until I found the nearby gas station. I pulled into my usual spot, shakily inhaling a smoke as I looked at the cornfield across the street. The power line stood tall, almost menacingly, in the dark swirl of gloom in the sky. It has to stop. It has to. I snuffed out my cigarette and exited my car, feeling the chilly wind assault me as I closed the door behind me. I thought of calling the police, but I didn't know what to say, or what I would even tell them. Every scenario I imagined ended with me just being called crazy again. My feet moved on their own, and I swallowed hard as I started walking in the direction I had viewed so many times on my lunch breaks. The grass faded as the corn began, and I made my way into the deafening sea of husks ahead. The stalks were loud and cracked under my feet, and the mud sucked at my shoes. I tripped and stumbled on the uneasy ground, and I grabbed the stalks in an attempt to keep myself balanced. My legs burned and the crops scratched and whipped at me. Soon I felt lost in the corn, every step closing me off from the outside world. The corn stalks were taller the more you went in, until eventually I felt like I was being swallowed by it. I kept my eyes off the power line above. I decided I would look there, and if I found nothing, I would turn back and go back home. Maybe then I would get help. Just as I was getting used to the crunch of my footsteps, the ground started to even out, and I found myself in a small clearing. 4 large metal posts stood on each side, posted at each corner of the clearing. I could hear the creak of metal swaying in the wind, and I felt myself shrink as I looked up. I was standing underneath the power line now, next to the lake where I had first seen the skinned man a few days ago. It was eerily quiet and cold in the clearing, moss and dead grass covering the churned mounds left by excavation. I felt the strong urge to run back to my car, but every time I closed my eyes, I was reminded by the same piercing stare and scream. If I went back home, I would just go back to hiding in my apartment. I looked for a disturbed dirt, for a grave, for a body, but what I found was nothing but cold dirt and dried husks, with the occasional rock jutting from the earth. I didn't know what I expected to find, but I found no skinned man or signs of there ever being one. The corn swayed in the circle around the clearing, and I felt foolish for wandering out there by myself. The wind picked up, and above the power line creaked. I watched the electrical lines sway in the sky, and I felt small and out of my depths. What was I hoping to find here? A skeleton laying in the grass? Stupid, I thought to myself. Walking all the way out here with not even as much as a shovel. My hands started to ache from the cold, and I found myself shivering. There was nothing to be found here. Maybe I did need help after all. I turned around to leave, my cheeks burning with frustration. I felt my eyes water and the helpless draw of tears ready to further my own embarrassment. There's no skin man. You're just crazy. You're fucking crazy. As I sulked back to the edge of the clearing, something caught my foot. I tripped and stumbled into the mud. Looking back at whatever had a hold on me, it was heavy and cold, and it kicked up a line of dirt in its wake. It was a metal chain. I looked at it dumbfounded. The links heavily rusted and caked with dirt. I untangled my foot and held it up, and followed the source of the mysterious chain. I got back on my feet and gathered the slack, staring at it for a moment before tugging on it. The lead disappeared into the earth in front of me, directly below the power line. The chain was cold to the touch, but I wrapped it around my hands and started to pull. The earth fought against me, matted weeds and mud slinging as I ripped it from the ground. I pulled and pulled, digging my heels into the ground as I yanked it free. It caught suddenly, and I put all of my weight behind it, running backwards until it suddenly broke loose. In an uproar of debris, I fell flat on my ass. And in front of me, a wooden door fell open. A whisper cooed from underground, and I climbed to my feet and walked to it. It was the entrance to a dark pit, a crude ladder leading the way to an unseen destination. My mind begged to call the police, my body pleaded to go home. In the end, I did neither, and my shoes soon found the rungs of an old, forgotten ladder. The light above shows a floor of damp dirt and bones, long decayed and hidden in the dark. The passage wasn't as long as I thought. It went down about 10 feet. I expected it to open up into some grand chasm below, but when the ladder came to an end, I found only a corridor. A 10 by 10 room carved deep into the earth. The light from above pulled in, cutting through a heavy haze of dust and stagnant air. I squinted through the heavy particles in an attempt to see what the light seemed to be avoiding. Once the dust began to fade, I could hear the whispers growing, a hushed chorus that called to me from the corner of the derelict hole. The walls are etched with erratic text, words toppling words in an indecipherable message. I want to read the words, but I'm drawn away. My focus pulled to the corner where the light shines the least. In the corner is a brass chair, and sitting in it, a corpse. A corpse with dozens of limbs. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't, the mummified, curled hands demanding my attention. It looked like a human, its skeletal frame filling the entirety of its throne-like seat. Empty eyes and hanging mouth, its extra bony arms fanning out like wings. A gaping hole sits in the center of its chest, like something had been ripped out of it. Impossibly proportioned and long dead, the being dedicated several appendages to the object it held in its lap, a glass orb, radiating the slightest shimmer of red. The whispers were coming from it. I remember being unable to lift my eyes from the orb. It drew me in, its whispers beckoning me to the dying glow it held within. The corpse stayed frozen in place, its decayed frame getting larger the closer I got to it. It wanted me to take the orb, it was offering it to me. I reached out and I touched it. A static aura tickling my fingers as they drew near the glass. I wanted the orb. I needed to hold it. Nothing else seemed to matter. My fingers hovered around the glass in anticipation, and a strange heat billowed from it as I prepared to lift it. I looked into the corpse's eyes, twin skeletal voids that watched from its petrified husk. Just as I grabbed the orb, the corpse's jaw clacked, the orb exploding with red light, and with it, an unimaginable heat. The red glow consumed me like a raging fire, engulfing me until it covered my entire body. I tried to swipe it off of me, but it started to burn. a wicked chemical boil that seeped into my arms and legs like acid. I watched in horror as my skin started to part with me, bubbling and oozing until I was left with nothing but bloody meat. It collected and twisted in front of me like paint, a writhing mass that slipped through my fingers. When I tried to grab it, my strength began to fade and my arms no longer felt capable of holding me. I collapsed helplessly to the ground, glaring at the orb in betrayal as it shined bright and decadent. My muscles felt the pain of every speck of dirt, every piece of gravel that scraped mercilessly into my exposed flesh. The pain was unbearable. A never-ending scream across my entire body, that the massive skin contorted and flexed, stretching across the corpse as its many limbs and it webbed between every finger and over every dried tendon, new life taking shape and cracking as it coated over the nightmarish husk. The so many arms assisted in the new fitting, pulling and tugging until the garb was complete. I could only reach out in misery while it repaired itself, the horrible form worsening the longer I watched it mold. Joints popped to life, thin eyelids blinked. Once the form was complete, the gaping chest cavity quivered in agitation. Before my unclosable eyes, the being picked up the orb and with its many hands buried it into its chest. The cavity sealed on its own, tendrils of thin skin stitching itself into the red glow, was no more. While I lay helpless on the cold and painful dirt, the being rose from the chair, standing and stretching tall before hunching over on its multiple limbs. It looked at me for a second, an emotionless clacking echoing in the chamber before it makes its way to the ladder and climbs it like a fucking spider. The last I see of the monstrosity is its appendages slinking into the light right before the door slams shut behind it. I've been in this darkness ever since. I don't know how long I've been down here, hours, days, weeks. All I know is my constant suffering and my inability to escape it. Despite my exposed body, I'm immune to the cold, immune to the prospect of perishing. It's not the only change. Since discovering the corpse, I can feel an extension of myself, an ethereal tether that lets me move beyond my miserable form on this cold earth, some kind of drift between time and space. I don't know if it's an after effect of the orb itself or my fractured sanity in this tomb I find myself in. I can do other small things like move grains of dirt or sway the air in one way or another. In an attempt to recollect some of my sanity, I have inscribed my story in the walls of this grave, but the longer time goes on, the foggier the memories seem to get. I don't understand it. I can only hope what I think is transpiring is real and not a fabrication of my delusional misery. I can't go far, but each time I find I can get a little further. I can see the cornfield above my tomb. I can almost feel the air dancing across it. If I focus hard enough, I can see myself. I don't know why they are there or if it's even real, but if I try hard enough, maybe I could reach them. I need to warn them and tell them to stay away from here. I need to tell them of the monster I set free. I don't know what it wants or why it was down here, but I fear for the life I left above the ground. Maybe someone can stop it. Maybe I can stop it. In my shattered mind, I remember where I used to work, where I used to live. If I can find them at the right time. If I find them at the right time, maybe I can warn them. Maybe I can save them from a demise such as this.